All right, thanks for joining us tonight. We're Josh and Rick on We the People, WKMnews.com. We're here at Harry Stone Grill. Just want to thank them for hosting us tonight. Thank you folks for coming out.
We're the voice of liberty here in the Ohio River Valley, and we'd like to thank our friend Doc and so many others who've worn the uniform of our great country, as well as our favorite Marine up here, for all you've done and your dedication to service. We've got two guests tonight. We decided to pair them up rather than split them up. To my left, immediate left, is Jud McMillin from the 68th District and Jim Lucas from the 69th District. You guys want to say where your districts are located? Because we did get redistricted.
District 69 contains a major part of Jackson County, Jennings County, and then a small portion of Jefferson County, with half of a township in Bartholomew.
And District 68 used to contain Switzerland County and Ohio counties, which was pretty close to us down here, and that's where we got to meet Rick as I was working those counties. But after redistricting, it includes the northern two-thirds of Dearborn County, most of Franklin County, and all of Union County.
What committees do you guys serve on?
I serve on the Education Committee, Public Policy, and Environmental.
And I am the chair of the Courts and Criminal Code Committee, the vice chair of the Rules Committee, and I serve on the Judiciary Committee as well as Roads and Transportation.
General Assembly's not till January, but you guys are already involved in study groups this summer.
Yes.
What do you see forming up as the major issues next year?
Well, there's a lot of different issues. Obviously, anytime we have a long session, the budget's going to be the big issue. So we got to figure out how to spend a whole bunch of money, of the taxpayers' money, over the course of the next 2 years. And there's going to be a whole bunch of people. As I don't think it's any secret that Indiana's in a pretty good position right now. We've got about $2 billion surplus, and it's a good position to be in. But when you start going in and opening up the budget, everybody's got a great idea as to where they want to spend money when you've got some money around. And just because you have a quarter in the bank doesn't mean you need to spend a quarter in the bank. In fact, I believe just the opposite, that the way that you maintain fiscal integrity is not spending everything you have. So having a surplus in the budget is really nice, but it is also creates the opportunity for people to come in and want to do excessive spending. So we're going to have to really hold the line in that regard, I think, and that's always the biggest issue.
I agree. The good points. Judd did mention this being a budget year. Obviously, that's first and foremost, I think, on a lot of people's mind is getting the budget. But one of the things I like to look at is I constantly ask myself, what is the role of government? And the fact that Indiana is sitting on a $2 billion surplus tells me that we've been very good stewards of the taxpayers' money. We want to look at keeping taxes low. But government does have a role. We have to evaluate the services that we are providing and make sure that we're providing the most efficient type of services that we can. So it's a constant evaluation, and again, being a budget year, this is something we're going to spend a lot of time on.
One of the issues that I certainly do want to hit on is something that we did last year, and I think it's something that's important to do every year, and it's something that, quite frankly, I think we haven't done near enough of. But last year we were able to pass what's being touted as one of the largest government reduction bills in the history of Indiana. And I don't see why we shouldn't have a large government reduction bill every single year. It's no secret that when you get 150 representatives, 100 representatives, and 50 senators in the State House, everybody comes with an idea of something that they want to change or that they want to add to government. And that's been going on for a long time in this country and in this state. And so what you end up with is a constantly growing statutory scheme that creates undue burdens on people in all walks of life. And so last year we really looked at, okay, what things are on the books that shouldn't be because they are unduly burdensome, or what things are on the books right now that are just there because somebody put them on there 50 years ago or 150 years ago that we don't need anymore, and we started cutting those things back. And I think that every year people keep coming up and adding more things, so we need to every year have a bill that looks what's in there and what we can remove from the law. I'm excited about continuing to move in that direction.
As a freshman legislator, one of the neat things I discovered last year, or 2 years ago when we first came aboard, Speaker Bosma challenged people, and instead of creating laws, see how many laws we can find to take off the books. And that meant a lot to me as a small government person to actually hear that come out of the lips of leadership. That was a really refreshing thing to hear. We're allowed so many bills over in the House each year. We're allowed 10 bills.
10 in the long, 5 in the short.
10 in the long, 5 in the short. I'd almost like to see where for every bill we introduce, we have to find 2 to take away. But we're in the right direction. We're going in the right direction.
Well, that gets to the point of what are the essential functions of government are. I mean, our basis is Tea Party, okay? You started the Tea Party in Seymour. When we started one down here in Madison, Jud keeps coming over. I'm not sure what they got over on the east side of the state.
We got some things going on over there.
I know, but it's just what would be your top 5? I mean, I know you got it against the backdrop of the Indiana Constitution. What are your top 5 essential functions of what state government should be?
Well, that's you mentioned the Tea Party. We have to be careful. The left has hijacked that term Tea Party and placed some negative connotations to it. I like to think of it as, we called our group We the People, because Constitution, we need to return back to the Constitution. And again, the thing that keeps driving me is I constantly ask myself, what is the role of government? And when you go back and study the history of the Founding Fathers, the type of representative government that they left us, republic, it wasn't designed to be in our everyday lives the level that it is right now. There's pretty much nothing you can do right now that isn't controlled by the government. And again, being a freshman legislator, one of the most frustrating things for me that I learned early and still seeing is how much the federal government actually dictates what the states do. And it's frustrating trying to tell constituents the states technically should have all of the power, well, most of the power. But when our education decisions, our healthcare decisions, energy bills, jobs, the inflation of the money, the currency, it's driving a minimum wage argument right now is coming from federal. Washington is really has its tentacles in everything, and trying to evaluate that and see what we can do. And I think probably one of the best thing the states can do is to stand up and say, no, you were never intended to have this sort of power. We need to start taking that power back. And we can do it peacefully and civilly and politely, but those are conversations that we really need to have.
Can you paint that picture for us, though? I mean, how would that, pick an issue, I mean, how would that go down?
Education. We're hearing right now, we have to, there's no child left behind. If we don't do what the federal government says to do, we could lose $200 to $250 million. A lot of money. That is a big chunk of money. But putting things in perspective, $200 to $250 million compared to a $7.3 billion state education budget is really 3 to 4%. When you talk to any small business owner out there and ask them, could you absorb a 3 to 4% loss? Well, absolutely. It would make me that much more efficient. So actually, we're allowing ourselves to be shackled by the federal government dictating what we do, educating who's your children, by only something that amounts to 3 or 4%. So having the courage and I think the leadership to stand up, and those things don't happen overnight, but just start openly questioning that. Say, why are we doing this? Why are we allowing ourselves to be put in this corner? And then shed some light on some transparency and educate the public and let them know, because education is the key. We have to let people know what their government is actually costing them, and not just in terms of financials, financial cost, but regulations, cost of compliance, and things of that nature. So I think that would be a good start.
Good deal.
Jud, where's Common Core fit in that education scheme? Does that fit in the? I mean, I understood Governor Pence saying, this is a whole new, brand new. This is Indiana's common standards. But I hear other people saying, no, it's just Common Core rebranded.
Yeah, and I don't mean to shrug off on Jim, but he's on the education committee. He knows more about that stuff than I do. But
So it's his fault.
No, definitely not his fault. Absolutely not. I'm just telling you, he's going to know more about this than I do, as being on the education committee. The one thing I will say, though, is we need to have standards for Hoosier kids that are crafted by us and that are designed by us and that will work for our kids. I certainly think that the notion of allowing the federal government, as Jim was indicating earlier, to have an overburdensome role or a more powerful role in our education system is definitely not what we need for our Hoosier children. The one thing I will caution against, though, is we can't be so wrapped up in making sure that those standards don't apply that we start thumbing our nose at any standard that is put there, because we have to have standards so that our kids can be educated. Because when you start talking about education, there's a lot of things I can talk about with education, but I firmly believe that you pick your problem. Any problem it is that we have right now in our country, it is solved by educating our children, because educated children grow up to be educated adults. Educated adults make better decisions than uneducated adults. And whether you want to talk about healthcare problems, or you want to talk about welfare problems, or you want to talk about virtually anything, it is solved by having educated kids. You talk about the political problems that you see, that is best solved in a republic through an educated electorate. I feel very firmly about that. So we need to make sure that education is one of the things that we are really investing in, and that we do have solid standards that will produce good educated adults as we go through.
Where is that in your committee then? Because I went up to Mooresville the other night, and we were hearing that the Constitution isn't part of the Indiana standards as far as being taught.
You hear, that's the thing. There's so many rumors and things flying on out there. Instead of more government and education, I'd like to try more freedom and less government. We have some of the best men and women in society teaching in our schools, public schools, private schools, and thank God for them, because the people that they get into it, that's what they want to do. That's where their heart is and their calling is. But yet we get, I view myself as I'm on a 2-year life cycle. Every 2 years the House changes. Every 4 years the Senate changes. And for me to be that arrogant to think that I can go up there and tell teachers how to teach children, and I agree with Jud here, we have to have standards, but do we have to tell these teachers how to teach? Let teachers teach. Because the kids in Madison or Seymour or Jennings County aren't going to teach at the same pace or level that kids in Indianapolis or Gary or Evansville might. So let's come up with some type of this expectation of where we would like to see our kids, but let's let the locals be more creative and empower them.
We should make a school board or something.
That's exactly
Something like
that.
Yeah.
But we also have to hold parents accountable too. I think all too often too many people are seeing government as the solution. So we have this expectation of schools, well, you take care of my kids. And now the government is coming in and feeding the children. I mean, they've all but become the de facto parent for so many of these children. And that's just not the way it's going to work out.
Well, and to Josh's and Jim's point, I think most of us would be ready to say the federal government shouldn't be dictating to individual school corporations exactly how you should teach. And I would say that the state shouldn't be dictating to individual school corporations exactly how you should teach. You mentioned the Constitution isn't necessarily in the
Indiana standards.
The Indiana standards. I don't know if it is or if it isn't, to be honest with you, Rick. I haven't seen those. But what I would like to see is the standards that Indiana specifically dictates to be as broad as possible, and delegate the authority or give the authority to those local school boards. So as Jim was saying, each school board can decide what is right for them and what they can be teaching. Because you need to untie those school boards, because exactly as he said, different locations are going to have different things that they want to teach. And with the things that we have done to free up school choice for people so they can go different places, the design is to promote some competition within schools, because competition, I personally feel, generally makes everything better. And if one school corporation is teaching one way and the other one's teaching a different way, and this one is the one that works for people, then kids will go there. And what that will do is it will cause this school corporation to adopt the good ideas from that school corporation, and all of a sudden the rising tide rises all ships. You got a lot better school corporations all over the state for all the kids.
But with that, we also have to have the freedom to let. I know some of our public schools out there. How do you get government-running education out of government-run education? That's
or government-run business.
But we have to allow our public schools the freedom and flexibility to live up to their strengths as well, as opposed to charter schools and private schools. We've given them, relaxed the standards a little bit on them and given them the freedom. I think we have to do that with our public schools as well, because there's so much talent out there that's shackled, and I would like to unleash that talent and see what happens.
Do you get that through legislation, or is that deregulation through the different like under the governor? The way I understand the.
That's a good question. That's one of the things. Education's everything's local when you talk education. There are so many people entrenched in the existing system that any type of change is going to kind of rock the boat a little bit. So again, it's being transparent and open and having honest discussions. And so, what we're doing now isn't working. Not to say that's a failure, but when you look that over half of Indiana's budget, our state budget, goes into K through 12. And we're talking about 1 million kids with 60,000 teachers in public schools. So over half of our approximately $15 billion budget goes into education, K through 12. Then you look at property taxes. Approximately half of our property taxes go into K through 12. And then you throw in billions of federal monies, grants, and then that's not to mention the millions that the locals put into it, helping to educate children through learning centers, TIF, Boys and Girls Club, Girls Inc., organizations like that. So education has so much money going into it. But when you look at the type of student that's coming out, 30% of kids that go to college need some type of remediation. And now you throw in higher education numbers into that, 2/3 of our budget goes into education. And when we have, 24%, mid-20s, mid to low 20s of our population has a college degree, okay, we keep hearing the term investment. Well, with investment, there has to be return on investment. Are we getting the best bang for our buck with the money that we're spending on education? Well, I don't believe we can blame that on the grassroots level, because it's being dictated at the state level how to teach. So we have to, I believe, do a fundamental evaluation from top to bottom and basically say, there's got to be a better way with all the billions of dollars we're spending. Long-winded answer to a short question.
All right, we're We the People with WKM News. I'm Josh.
I'm Rick Roos.
We're here with State Representatives Jud McMillin and Jim Lucas. And guys, let's switch gears a little bit. We've been talking education. Let's talk, there's a lot of positive things going on with Indiana. I think, Rick and I are doing this to advance the cause of liberty. And I think Indiana has done that on some issues. You've got some craziness that comes out of California and the east and left coast, but sometimes, we really need to lead. And one of the places that we've done that, I think, is on the Second Amendment. We've got one of the oldest concealed carry licensing systems. We have stand your ground laws. So what's the status on the Second Amendment? Is there any, what's going on with that in Indiana?
We're doing great, but there's always room for improvement, the way I look at it. Second Amendment to me is very near and dear for the simple fact that when you look, you can Google or look up the first law of nature, it's self-defense. And every human being has a right to defend their life, liberty, or property, and the best means of defending that is with a firearm. The Founding Fathers understood that. We have not been granted the right to bear arms. It was recognized and protected, which is the meaning behind the Second Amendment. I helped to pass an amendment last year with the great help of Representative McMillin here, which decriminalized the lawful storage of a firearm on school property. And that got quite a bit of attention. Not all of it was positive. But again, it was an opportunity, I think, to engage those that wish to infringe upon our right to bear arms or self-defense, own a firearm. And I welcome those opportunities for discussion. But again, there's always room for improvement on that front.
Gotcha. I want to real quick, Josh, if I can give Jim a lot of credit for that, because Second Amendment issues are very near dear to our heart, and we want to do great things with those things. But that is such a easy issue for people to politicize when they want to battle against just making common sense efforts to protect people who want to lawfully own a firearm. And in a hypersensitive political world, when you have 2-year terms, it takes a lot of guts to stand up and say, I know I'm going to catch heat for doing the right thing, but I'm going to do it anyway. And Jim has really led the charge in the State House since he's been there, done some really great things in that regard, and it takes a lot of guts. So I just wanted to publicly thank him for that.
Definitely. Well, when you look at the actual facts, and I love truth, facts, reason, and logic, but while we were trying to shepherd this bill through the House, the AP come out with a report that there was an 83% increase on applications for a license to carry a handgun over the prior year amongst Hoosiers, with the largest segment of that being women.
Right.
So that was really nice. This is a popular topic. It bodes very well for the grassroots. Once you get through all the hysteria in the headlines and a lot of the press, pushing an anti-gun agenda, and you just get down to the basics, gun rights are very meaningful to the vast majority of Hoosiers,
Right.
and across the country as well.
And you mentioned too, we don't see some of the women's rights groups out there talking about it, but it's a women's rights issue. You talk about those women that are out there applying. I mean, who needs that ability to equalize themselves in an attack more than women? So
Yes.
A great man once said that all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is a good man do nothing.
Edmund Burke.
And I'm a good guy with a gun, but you can be a good guy with a gun in Indiana and go 10 miles across the border in Ohio and be a felon. Is there anything that we can do or that's on the legislative agenda to make Indiana's very free, and I don't want to change that, very free handgun license more palatable for reciprocity in other states? Because it's a big challenge that we have as gun owners right now.
Yeah, we've looked into that a lot. One of the best things that Ohio could do would just be allow Indiana to annex them if they wanted some freedom for their citizens.
There you go.
The fact of the matter is, when you have other states that are going to be more oppressive than we want to be, what they would require is for us to increase the burden on law-abiding citizens to get their firearm over here for them to grant reciprocity. And I don't think that the people of Indiana are willing to do that. There is some talk about the possibility of creating a secondary license in Indiana so that you would have the license that you have now that still exists, put another option on the table that would require some additional training and some additional hoops to jump through to get the license that would then meet the requirements of some of those other states. But that's really the only way that we get there without having to acquiesce to what they want in their state and
Right.
what we don't want in our state.
Right.
Yeah, I respectfully disagree with that. I think that's no offense to Judd, but I think that's going backwards because there are avenues right now, like Utah or Florida permit, which other states recognize, and that we can get an out of state. Even if we did what Representative McMillin said, there would be no guarantee that those states would recognize that. So I think the best way is to continue to be the beacon of freedom and lead the way and let other states see that, recognizing a person's natural right to defend themselves and that making good people helpless does not make bad people harmless, no matter how many laws you put on the book.
Right.
We just have to stand up for that.
Okay.
It's not quite a Second Amendment thing, but we were talking before we went on in the Madison Courier on the weekend had a big picture of a big armored troop carrier or whatever it was, and it was given to us, Jefferson County, by the Department of Homeland Security. Apparently, they can give away things like that. I have a concern. I felt a letter to the editor coming on. I'm sitting there going, why would we need something like this if we got National Guard armory over here? And, the sheriff, and I appreciate that it wasn't the sheriff, but it was a guy got beat by him last time. But he said, well, we're of course going to take it, Wait a minute. It just seems like we're militarizing all the counties. It seems like our police are starting to look like paramilitary personnel. I got a concern. Do you guys have a concern?
I certainly share that same concern with you. We certainly want to respect our police officers. We want to give them the opportunity and everything that they need to keep us safe. But our police and our military have separate functions, and you are correct. I think Jim was saying before we went on there, we have the 4th largest National Guard in the country. We have we have other avenues to take care of those more military-designed exercises. But while we want to give our officers every opportunity to keep us safe, history is replete with examples of opportunities for government policing powers to continue to expand, and for the government to look at the citizenry and just say, trust us, we will take care of you, that ultimately leads to the government overrunning the citizenry. And I don't need to get into a bunch of different examples, but anybody who picks up a history book and opens it up can find an example of that pretty easily. And we have to be very, very careful. I've been telling several people, I think one of the biggest things we're going to have to be cautious of in the next couple of generations is making sure that we don't, out of fear of outside problems, give government so much authority that not only are they taking care of the bad people, but they're putting so many handcuffs on the good people that we lose the freedoms that we fought for in this country. And I think that's a huge issue that we've got to be very vigilant on.
Was it Franklin said, he that would give up essential liberty for a little temporary safety deserve neither?
Yeah.
And again, I agree with Jud here. Nobody, I think every rational human being, everybody wants to see our fine men and women that wear the uniform. We want them to be as safe as humanly possible. We want them to go home to their spouses and loved ones at night. With that being said, this militarization of police departments does concern me, for the simple fact that America was founded on individual freedom and liberty. With technology the way it is, we have cell phones, we have detection technologies, drones even, as long as Fourth Amendment, we keep an eye on that. The drug war, I know it seems is a driving force behind a lot of this rationale for this ramping up of military equipment. Are there other things, other tactics that we can employ, things we can do different without having to go to that extreme of having military hardware in every county? So it's just, those are good discussions to have, good questions to ask. But again, we have to be very, very careful going down that rabbit hole, because once you go down, that's a very slippery
But
slope.
it seems like every county seems like they've got one. And wait a minute, they never did say, okay, who's going to pay for the insurance on this sucker?
But we're talking about that.
I know,
and that's a good thing. But see, that's what I'm saying. Those conversations are starting to begin, and we're hearing more and more about that. People are stepping, and it's on the left and the right. So that's a good thing, and those are good conversations.
And your drone comment, I think the last,
We have to be very careful with
the last testing facility, like in Maryland, it's online. And I understood that there was some consideration as far as legislation. Okay, United States government, we don't want a drone-free zone over Indiana. I don't know how to monitor that, but that's
serious stuff.
That is serious.
Well, as technology progresses, obviously that's where your laws have to progress as well. But again, going back to the Fourth Amendment, people, the right to be secure in your person's, house and effects shall not be violated. Well, obviously the founding fathers didn't know about drones, but they knew about the right to privacy, and that applies to technology, whether it's 200 years ago, present, or 200 years from now. The right to privacy doesn't change.
I understand there's a mechanism that all the state police either have the capacity to do, or that it's being promulgated as far as being able to scan license plates, and that way they can run the plates, they can run the all the background and all that stuff. Is that legal?
Well, it can be in certain situations. As Jim indicated, as technology increases, we're going to have to make sure that our laws are updated regularly. I don't know if you recall this, but last year, maybe 18 months ago, the big issue was the Stingray. And the Stingray was the device that allegedly police officers had that they could just turn on and they could start downloading information from your personal cell phone. With smartphones, a lot of people have their whole lives on there. So you're letting the government immediately have access to all kinds of areas of your life that they shouldn't have. So last year, we tackled that issue and we went forward and we made sure that police officers weren't able to do those types of things without going through the proper channels, without getting warrants to make sure that they were abiding under the terms of the Fourth Amendment, those types of things. If there's new technology out there that's doing those types of things with license plates, or facial recognition technology that's coming up, and all those types of things, those are things that we're going to have to continue making sure that we have a strong foundation that protects the intent of the Constitution to make sure that individuals' rights to be secure in their effects against unreasonable searches and seizures aren't violated. It's going to be tough, but again, we have to be very, very vigilant in those regards.
This is We the People with Josh and Rick, Voice of Liberty here in the Ohio River Valley on WKMnews.com.